He leaned across the restaurant, his new wife dripping in diamonds, and smirked at the woman he'd left behind. "It's a shame, Alice," he boasted loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some people get promotions and yachts in Monaco, others get, well, whatever this is." He thought she was finished, a discarded part of his past. He thought she was nothing without him. What he didn't know was that while he was busy showing off, she was busy building an empire. And at the most exclusive event in the world, he was about to see his ex-wife step off a billionaire's private yacht, not as a guest, but as the CEO. The smell of roasted coffee beans and expensive pastry usually comforted Alice Dawson. The little bistro, Le Coq d'Or, was her one weekly indulgence, a small island of normalcy in the turbulent ocean her life had become. It was here, laptop open and a lukewarm cappuccino at her elbow, that she was rebuilding. Each line of code she wrote, each email she sent, was a brick in the new wall of her future. Then the bell above the door chimed and a shadow fell over her table. "Well, look who it is," said a voice that still haunted her low moments. Alice looked up. Her heart didn't break, not anymore. It just seized, like a car engine flooded with ice water. Mark Jennings, her ex-husband, stood there wearing a suit so new it still looked stiff. It was a Tom Ford, she noted with the clinical detachment of an appraiser. Beside him, clinging to his arm, was Chloe. She was blonde, bright, and blindingly expensive. A Cartier love bracelet was stacked next to a diamond tennis bracelet that Alice knew for a fact cost more than her entire postgraduate education. "Mark, Chloe," Alice said, her voice admirably steady. She closed her laptop. "Alice, darling." Chloe chirped, her voice a high tinkling bell of false sympathy. "I hardly recognized you. You look comfortable." Comfortable. It was a dagger disguised as a compliment. Alice was wearing simple dark jeans, a navy blue cashmere sweater, and her old faithful loafers. She'd been working for 12 hours straight and had run out for air. Chloe, meanwhile, looked like she'd just stepped out of a Vogue editorial. "We were just celebrating," Mark said, puffing his chest out. He flagged down the waiter, not to order but to be seen. "I've been promoted, Senior Vice President, European Markets." "Congratulations, Mark," Alice said, meaning it. A clean break was all she ever wanted. "It's just, things are really taking off," he continued, unable to stop. He was performing not for her but for Chloe and the restaurant at large. "The new bonus is, well, let's just say it's significant. We're flying to Monaco for the weekend, the yacht show. Our client, you know, the one I landed, has his 150-footer docked in Port Hercules. It's a different world, Alice. You wouldn't believe it." Alice felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks. He wasn't just telling her his good news. He was rubbing her face in what she'd lost. Or rather, what he thought she'd lost. "He's being modest," Chloe cooed. "He's the star of the whole firm. Everyone says so." She then looked at Alice's laptop, her perfectly sculpted nose wrinkling. "Are you still, tinkering with that little ocean project? It's sweet that you have a hobby." A hobby. Alice's hobby was a complex schematic for a self-sustaining AI-driven marine filtration system that could theoretically remove microplastics from coastal waters at a rate 10 times faster than any current technology. It was the culmination of her life's work, the PhD she'd put on hold to support his career, the dream she'd resurrected from the ashes of their marriage. "It's going well, thank you," Alice said stiffly. Mark leaned in, his voice dropping to a confidential, condescending boom. "Listen, Alice, I'm glad to see you're managing, really. But don't you get tired of this, the little cafes, the trying? When we were married, you had everything." "I had your everything, Mark," she corrected him, her voice quiet but sharp. "I'm working on building my own." Mark laughed. It was a short, sharp sound of pity. "Right, your own. Look, I know the divorce left you with, well, not a lot. If you're ever in a real bind, I mean a real one, my assistant can probably find some administrative work for you. Data entry, maybe." It was the final calculated cruelty, the offer of charity. He saw her as a broken, pathetic creature to be pitied, a cautionary tale he could tell his new shiny friends. "I'll keep that in mind," Alice said, her spine turning to steel. She gathered her things, placing a few bills on the table. "Oh, and Alice," he called out as she reached the door. She paused but didn't turn. "Try to get out a little more. You look pale." She walked out of Lecoq's door without looking back, the sound of his laughter and Chloe's tinkling giggle following her into the street. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just walked faster, her mind already back on her schematics. He thought he was watching her drown. He had no idea she was learning to breathe underwater. The first month after the divorce, Alice had lived in a fog. The betrayal wasn't just the affair with Chloe, a junior associate in his department. It was the words he'd used. The final fight had been a masterpiece of psychological warfare. "I'm suffocating, Alice," he had yelled, gesturing around their beautiful minimalist apartment, the one she had decorated, the one she had managed while he focused on his career. "You have no ambition," he'd accused. "I'm on a rocket ship and you're ballast. You're just weight. You used to be sharp. Now all you talk about is plankton and ocean currents. It's boring. It's my field, Mark." She had screamed back, her voice raw. "It's marine engineering. It's what I was doing when you met me." "Was," he'd sneered. "And now you just dabble. Chloe, she gets it. She's hungry. She understands my world." His world. A world of power lunches and quarterly reports of stock options and ladder climbing. She had stepped off her own ladder to hold his steady, and now that he'd reached the top, he was kicking her off. The divorce settlement was calculated and swift. He'd generously given her half of their liquid assets, which she discovered had been systematically minimized for months. He kept the apartment, the car, the art. She was left with enough to rent a small one-bedroom flat and a bitter taste in her mouth. For 2 months, she'd been the woman he accused her of being, listless, broken, a ghost haunting a life she no longer recognized. She'd watch the rain fall and wonder if this was it. Was she just Mark Jennings' ex-wife forever? Then one rainy Tuesday, she was unpacking a box labeled old university stuff, and it fell open. Out spilled her old textbooks, her notes, and her thesis. The title, underlined in red, stared up at her: Dynamic AI Modeling for Autonomous Oceanic Filtration Systems. It wasn't just a paper. It was her soul. She remembered the fire she'd felt, the 3 a.m. sessions in the lab, the unshakable belief that she could fix something, that she could help heal the planet. Mark had called it cute. A new kind of fire ignited, one fueled not by passion, but by a cold, clear rage. He hadn't just left her, he had tried to erase her. He'd tried to convince her that her brightest self was ballast. She sold the one valuable thing he'd let her keep, a set of diamond earrings he'd given her for their 5th anniversary. She'd always hated them. They felt like a transaction. She sold them and used the $15,000 to buy a used 3D printer, high-spec server components, and a membership to a local tech incubator space. She lived on instant noodles and cheap coffee. She worked 20-hour days. She coded. She built. She simulated. She failed. The first prototype, a small spider-like drone, sank to the bottom of the incubator's test tank and short-circuited. She cried for 10 minutes, dried her eyes, and started rebuilding it from scratch. She sent her proposal to 43 different venture capital firms, environmental grants, and tech incubators. 42 were rejected. Most were form letters. "Not commercially viable," said one. "Too niche," said another. "Scope too ambitious for a new applicant," said a third. But one replied. It wasn't a yes, it was a maybe. "Your proposal, while unconventional, has landed on the desk of our innovation committee," the email read. "We are impressed by the core concept, but skeptical of the energy-to-filtration ratio claims. We invite you to present your findings at our Green Tech Innovation Summit." The email was signed by an assistant to the board of the Wainwright Foundation. Alice stared at the name. Wainwright. As in Arthur Wainwright, the reclusive, eccentric tech billionaire. the man who'd revolutionized data processing in the 90s and then vanished to pour his fortune into ocean conservation. He was a legend. He was also, according to industry rumor, utterly ruthless and impossible to impress. She had one shot. She booked a train ticket. She couldn't afford a hotel, so she planned to sleep on the train present and return the same day. She packed her prototype, now named Siren, into a reinforced pelican case and stepped out into the rain, a new woman. Not Alice, the ex-wife, but Alice Dawson, the engineer. The Wainwright Foundation headquarters wasn't a gleaming tower of glass and steel. It was a low, unassuming concrete and redwood building nestled in a grove of trees, a place that listened rather than shouted. Alice, in her only good suit, a charcoal gray, slightly too big number from a consignment shop, felt her hands shaking. She was in a boardroom that looked more like a university library, all dark wood and leather. At the end of a very, very long table sat Arthur Wainwright. He was not what she expected. He was in his late 60s with a shock of white hair, a weathered face, and piercing blue eyes. He wore a faded flannel shirt and jeans. He looked more like a fishing boat captain than a man worth $50 billion. "Ms. Dawson," he said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't stand. He just motioned to the chair opposite him. "You have 30 minutes. My team says your math is optimistic." Alice took a deep breath. "My math is accurate, Mr. Wainwright. It's just new." For the next 20 minutes, she didn't just present. She taught. She flew. She put up her simulations, her data, her CAD models. She talked about fluid dynamics, AI pathfinding, and biopolymer composites that could trap microfilaments without harming zooplankton. The board members, 3 men and 2 women in sharp suits, pecked at her. "And the energy cost?" one asked. "Solved," Alice said, flipping to a slide. "It's self-sustaining. It uses tidal microgenerators. It doesn't move against the current, it thinks with it. It hibernates, it anchors, it moves. It's not a machine, it's a creature." "And the cost of manufacturing?" "High at first," Alice admitted. "But the biopolymers are self-repairing. The lifespan is projected at 15 years versus the 2-year cycle for standard filters. The long-term ROI isn't just savings, it's ecosystem survival." There was silence. Arthur Wainwright hadn't said a word. He just stared at her, his head tilted. Finally he spoke. "You built this in your flat." It wasn't a question. "And an incubator space," she clarified. "With what, your divorce settlement?" Alice flinched. The question was too personal, too sharp. "With my capital, Mr. Wainwright. It was seed funding from a previous investment that went under." A tiny smile played on Wainwright's lips. "Good answer. But you're wrong about something." Alice's heart sank. "Sir, you're asking for $5 million to build a full-scale prototype." "Yes, that's the projection." "Wrong," he said. He leaned forward. The full, terrifying weight of his intellect and power filled the room. $5 million is a rounding error. It's not enough. To build this, to manufacture it at scale, to get it past regulatory hurdles, to deploy it in the Atlantic, the Pacific. You don't need $5 million. You need 50. And you need my entire logistics chain. You're thinking like a scientist. You need to start thinking like a general." Alice was speechless. I don't understand." "I'm not interested in funding your project, Ms. Dawson," Wainwright said, standing up. The board members scrambled to their feet. Alice felt the floor drop out. It was over. "I'm interested in acquiring it," he continued, walking around the table. "I'm creating a new subsidiary of Wainwright Industries. It will be called Wainwright Oceanic. We will absorb your patents, your research, and your prototype. We will give you my labs, my engineers, and my ships." He stopped directly in front of her. She had to tilt her head back to look him in the eye. "And you," he said, "will be its chief executive officer, effective immediately. Your salary will be significant. But you will answer to no one but me. You will work harder than you have ever worked in your life. You will live on planes and in labs. You will not fail. Do you accept Alice Dawson's world, which had shrunk to the size of a one-bedroom flat, and a lukewarm coffee suddenly expanded to encompass the entire globe? She didn't hesitate. She didn't cry. She just extended her hand. When do I start? The next 6 months were a blur of motion. The timid, comfortable woman Mark had mocked in the cafe was gone, forged into something new in the crucible of 100-hour work weeks. Alice moved to Zurich, the new headquarters of Wainwright Oceanic. Her first-class flights, Wainwright insisted, "I don't pay my CEOs to be tired," took her from the engineering labs in Singapore to the polymer foundries in Germany. The transformation was profound. It wasn't just the clothes, though she now wore the quiet, lethal elegance of quiet luxury, Loro Piana cashmere and Acris suits that whispered rather than shouted their worth. It was her presence. She chaired meetings with 30 engineers, all men, all older than her, and dissected their fluid dynamics reports with a precision that left no room for argument. She learned to command a room not by being the loudest, but by being the most informed. Arthur Wainwright was true to his word. He was a mentor, but a demanding one. He was less a father figure and more a grandmaster pushing his new prized pupil to see 10 moves ahead. "Don't tell me it's good," he'd bark at her over a video call. "Tell me why it's not perfect. Find the flaw, Alice. Never fall in love with your own work." The power cell gaskets are showing a 0.02% degradation in high salinity water. She'd report back, not missing a beat. "We're testing a new graphite composite. It will be fixed by Friday." He'd grunt. "Good. Don't be late." She still worked 20-hour days, but now she did it from a corner office with a view of Lake Zurich fueled by the finest Swiss coffee. She was exhausted, terrified, and happier than she had ever been in her life. She hadn't thought about Mark Jennings in 178 days. Then one Monday, Arthur called her. "Pack your bags, Alice." "Where am I going?" she asked, pulling up her calendar. "Tokyo." "Monaco," he said. "The yacht show." Alice paused. The name hit her like a small, unpleasant stone. "The yacht show, sir? I thought we were presenting to the ASEAN Environmental Council." "We are. But first we're going to sell. The biggest polluters in the ocean, Alice, aren't cargo ships. It's these people, the mega yachts. They dump waste, they burn fuel. But they also want to look green. They're obsessed with image. And more than that, they're obsessed with new tech. They'll pay a premium for it." "So I'm... what, going to set up a booth?" Arthur laughed. "No, Alice. You're not setting up a booth. You're the main event. I'm docking my flagship, the Odyssey. It's the most advanced green tech vessel on the planet. And for the last 3 months it's had your siren prototype, the real full-sized one, secretly installed. We're not just presenting the data, we're showing them the results. You're not a scientist asking for a grant anymore. You're a CEO closing a deal." Alice's mind spun. It's ready?" "It's better than ready," Arthur said, and she could hear the rare pride in his voice. "It's revolutionary. Now go. My jet's waiting." Port Hercules in Monaco was not just a harbor. It was a cathedral of wealth, a forest of white superstructures and gleaming chrome. The air hummed with a dozen languages, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the low thrum of engines worth more than most countries' GDPs. Mark Jennings was in heaven. He stood on the teak deck of the Aurelia, a 150-foot yacht that was in the grand scheme of this port respectable but not dominant. He was a guest of a guest, but he acted like he owned the place. "It's all about access, you see." He was telling a potential client, a Swiss banker who looked mildly bored. "You don't just come to Monaco. You're invited. It's a different echelon." Chloe, in a bright yellow bikini that was slightly too small, draped herself over him. "Mark, darling, the champagne is warm. Tell them to get another bottle of the Dom." "Of course, baby," Mark said, snapping his fingers at a passing deckhand. He felt a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. This was it. This was the life he deserved. He'd shed his ballast, and now he was flying. He looked at the crowds on the quay, the tourists, the hopefuls, the mere millionaires, and he smirked. and then he saw her. She was standing on the quay just past the security barrier looking at a tablet. She was dressed not for a party but for business. A crisp white silk blouse, tailored navy trousers, and simple, elegant flat loafers. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon. She looked different, sharper. Mark's smirk widened. It was too perfect. His pity project ex-wife right here at the scene of his greatest triumph. She was probably here as an assistant to some low-level boat supplier. Maybe she was handing out flyers. "Oh, this is priceless," he whispered to Chloe, pointing. Chloe squinted. "Is that Alice? My God, what is she doing here? She looks like she's going to a job interview." "I have to do this," Mark said, giddy with his own power. He leaned over the polished railing of the Aurelia. "Alice!" he shouted. The Swiss banker winced at the breach of decorum. "Alice Dawson!" Alice looked up from her tablet. Her face registered no surprise, no anger, no humiliation. Just recognition. She gave a cool, polite nod. "Fancy seeing you here," Mark called, his voice dripping with condescension. "A bit out of your element, aren't you? This is the deep end. You should stick to the local pool." A few people on the Aurelia's deck chuckled. Chloe giggled and waved. Alice simply checked her watch. "Hello, Mark. Chloe, you're looking well?" "We are," Mark boomed. "We're just about to sign a deal. You know how it is." He gestured around the boat. "This is how the other half lives right. What brings you here, cleaning the boats?" Alice looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Actually, I'm here for a presentation." "A presentation?" Mark laughed a full-throated, arrogant bray. "To who the seagulls don't tell me your little ocean project." "Something like that," Alice said. Just then a hush fell over their section of the quay. The polite murmur of the crowd was pierced by the sound of a different kind of engine, the high-pitched electric whine of a custom-built tender. It was a Wally tender, a $2 million boat accessory painted in matte black. It sliced through the water and pulled up to the VIP security gate right where Alice was standing. The security guards, who had been ignoring everyone, snapped to attention. Two men in sober dark suits stepped out, followed by a figure that made Mark Jennings' blood run cold. It was Arthur Wainwright, not a picture of him, not a look-alike, the actual Arthur Wainwright. The most powerful, most reclusive, and most respected man in technology. He was a king, and this port was his court. Mark's Swiss banker client gasped. That's Wainwright." Wainwright strode onto the quay, spotted Alice, and a warm smile broke across his weathered face. He ignored the stares, the whispered gasps, and the flash of a few cameras. "Alice, my dear," he said, his voice carrying clearly over the water. "Is everything ready for the demo?" Alice nodded, all business. "Yes, Mr. Wainwright. The new filter metrics just came in from the Odyssey's run. They're exceptional." Mark's brain tried to process the words. Mr. Wainwright? Alice? Odyssey? Exceptional. It was a word salad of impossibility. Wainwright beamed. "I told you. Never bet against a good idea." He then gestured to the waiting tender. "After you, Madam CEO." Madam CEO. The two words echoed across the water. Mark's champagne glass froze halfway to his mouth. Chloe's perfect smile dissolved, leaving her face blank and slack-jawed. Alice Dawson, the ballast, the hobbyist. The woman he'd offered a data entry job to step onto the $2 million tender. She sat down, crossed her legs, and just before the tender pulled away, she looked up. She made eye contact with Mark. She didn't smile. She didn't smirk. She just held his gaze. It was a look of pure, cold, indifferent finality. The tender sped away not towards a mid-level boat like the Aurelia, but towards the harbor's horizon, where the undisputed queen of the show was anchored, the Odyssey. It was a 350-foot leviathan of glass and sustainable teak a technological marvel that everyone had been talking about, but no one had been invited aboard. And his ex-wife, the woman he'd called boring, was heading to its deck. On the teak deck of the Aurelia, the silence was a physical thing. The upbeat lounge music that had been thrumming in the background suddenly seemed garish and loud. Mark Jennings was frozen, his arm still resting on the railing, the champagne glass in his hand forgotten. Madam, CEO. The two words echoed in the sudden vacuum replaying in his mind. He couldn't make them fit. This was Alice, his Alice, the quiet one, the one who wore comfortable sweaters and made hobby charts about plankton. CEOs were men like him. CEOs were not her. He tried to muster a laugh. It came out as a dry, choked sound. Well, he said, turning to the small crowd on the deck. She certainly fell on her feet. Good for her. He was trying to sound magnanimous, as if he were a proud mentor who had sent her on her way. No one was smiling. The Swiss banker, Mr. Staub, who had been the very picture of bored politeness, was now looking at Mark with a new terrifying intensity. He looked like a biologist who had just discovered a new and particularly loathsome species of insect. "You know Alice Dawson?" Staub asked. His voice was no longer bored. It was a flat, cold steel blade. Mark, still trying to salvage the situation, puffed his chest out. "Know her. Of course. I made her. She's my ex-wife." He said the last two words with a familiar dismissive swagger. It was the wrong move. Staub's eyes widened and he let out a short, sharp laugh of pure, incredulous contempt. "Your ex-wife." Chloe, who had been clinging to Mark's arm, now looked completely lost. Her perfect pouty smile was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. "Mark, what is he talking about?" She whispered, her voice a reedy squeak. "CEO. That's impossible. He must be mistaken. She's nothing. She's just... Staub interrupted, his voice cutting through the air. "Is the new CEO of Wainwright Oceanic. He gestured to the tender, now a black speck speeding toward the Odyssey, was Arthur Wainwright. The Arthur Wainwright. Staub turned his full chilling attention back to Mark. "Her little ocean project, as you so charmingly called it. My firm, along with every other major investment house in Zurich, has been trying to get a 30-minute meeting with Ms. Dawson for a month. We have been offering six-figure consulting fees just to get her opinion." Mark was speechless. He could only stare. "That hobby, Mr. Jennings," Staub continued, stepping closer, "is a patented AI-driven filtration system that is about to become a mandatory installation on every commercial vessel on Earth. The new UN maritime regulations, which I'm told are being announced next month, are being written around her technology." Staub gestured out at the harbor, at the billions of dollars of floating assets. "She's not just green tech, you idiot. She's a global tax. She's a one-woman monopoly. Every single person in this port, every shipping magnate, every cruise line, every one of these yacht owners will be paying her company millions starting next year just for the privilege of floating." He paused, letting the full, crushing weight of the revelation land. "And you," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper of pure disgust. "You, the man who has been begging my firm for a minor investment. You stood here on my friend's boat and you shouted at her. You offered her a job cleaning." The other guests on the deck, who had chuckled at Mark's earlier jibe, now looked at him with open, unveiled contempt. They began to turn away, moving to the other side of the boat, as if he were suddenly contagious. I didn't know," Mark stammered. It was the lamest, truest excuse of his life. "That's the point," Staub snapped. "That's the entire point. You were married to a mind like that, a mind that is about to change the world, and you didn't know. You looked at a diamond, and you thought it was a piece of glass. You called her ballast." Staub straightened his tie, his face a mask of finality. "Our meeting, Mr. Jennings, is over. The potential investment from my firm is also over. I do not do business with fools. It is bad for the portfolio. You are an embarrassment, a liability." He turned and walked away, not even giving Mark a chance to respond. Mark was left standing there. The music was back, or maybe it had never left. He was adrift. He looked for Chloe, his last beautiful piece of wreckage. She was staring at him, her face pale, her eyes wide. The calculation in them was cold and fast. She was assessing her losses. "Mark," she said, her voice completely flat. All the sweet cooing nonsense was gone. "Chloe, baby, listen," he began, reaching for her arm. It's a complication. It doesn't mean anything." She took a physical step back from his hand as if it were covered in filth. "You're a fool," she whispered, her voice filled with a venom that chilled him to the bone. "You had her, and you let her go. For me." The implication was clear. She herself was a terrible investment, and she was furious with him for making it. "Get me another drink," he growled, a desperate, pathetic attempt to reassert dominance. "Get it yourself." She snatched her designer handbag from the lounger. With a final withering look of contempt, she turned, straightened her bikini, and walked away from him. She headed toward a group of Italian men by the bar who had been watching the entire exchange, a predatory smile already forming on her lips. She was already liquidating her assets and moving on. Mark Jennings stood completely, utterly alone on the deck, surrounded by laughter and music. The champagne in his hand was warm and flat. He looked across the harbor to the Odyssey, lit up like a floating palace, a beacon of a power he could never ever touch. He hadn't just lost his ex-wife. He'd thrown her away. He'd thrown away the key to the entire world, all because he was too arrogant, too small, and too blind to see what was right in front of him. The aft deck of the Odyssey was not a party space. It was a theater of innovation. The sun was setting over Monaco, casting the super yachts of Port Hercules in a rich golden light. But here on Arthur Wainwright's flagship, the light was a cool electric blue. A semicircular amphitheater built into the deck faced a 20-foot-wide high-definition screen. Below it, submerged in a glass-walled test pool, was a siren unit, the S-1000, its articulated limbs and filtration gills gleaming. It looked less like a machine and more like a dormant, futuristic creature. Alice Dawson stood at the podium. She was not the woman from the cafe. She was not the trembling academic from the boardroom. She was as Arthur had intended, the CEO. She wore a dark graphite gray suit of an impossibly fine wool, her back to the Mediterranean. Before her sat 50 of the most powerful people on the planet. There were shipping magnates from Greece and Norway, the CEOs of 3 different global cruise lines, the Swiss banker Mr. Staub, who was watching her with a rapt, almost spiritual reverence, and even a discreet envoy from the UN's International Maritime Organization. They were all silent. "The problem," Alice began, her voice perfectly modulated, "has always been scale. We talk about cleaning the oceans, but we do it with nets and barges as if we're trying to empty a stadium with a teaspoon. We have been attacking the symptoms, not the system." She clicked a remote. The screen behind her lit up with a dynamic 3D model of the Atlantic Gyre. The siren system does not attack. It adapts. It doesn't fight the currents. It thinks with them. It is not a filter. It is an autonomous AI-driven marine ecosystem. It draws power from tidal microgenerators. It anchors during plankton blooms to avoid harming the food chain. It communicates with other units, forming a smart reef that can target a chemical spill in one moment and a microplastic cluster the next. She gestured to the tank. The siren unit whirred to life. "And now," she said, "for the results." The screen switched to a live feed from the Odyssey's onboard lab. "This vessel for the last 48 hours has been on a high-speed run from Genoa. We have been deliberately and with special clearance tracking the effluents of a major cargo shipping lane." A new graphic appeared. "This is the water we took in." A digital meter showed staggering levels of nitrates, phosphates, and polymer microfilaments. "And this," she said, her voice dropping, "is the water we released." A second meter appeared. The pollutant numbers were 0, all of them. But a new meter had appeared labeled oxygenation and phytoplankton viability. Both were up by 15%. A gasp, a collective intake of breath went through the crowd. A Greek shipping magnate, a notoriously ruthless man named Stavros, muttered, "My God." "We are not just cleaning the ocean," Alice said, her voice ringing with the unshakable conviction of truth. "We are healing it. We have in 48 hours processed over 20 million gallons of seawater and returned a living ecosystem. The S-1000 isn't a cost. It's the future of maritime viability. It's the price of admission to a planet that is no longer willing to wait." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "The UN's new maritime regulations, which my team and I helped draft, will be presented next month. A system like this will not be optional. My team at Wainwright Oceanic is now taking pre-orders for the first wave deployment." She didn't ask for questions. She didn't ask for applause. She simply concluded her presentation, gave a crisp nod, and stepped down from the podium. The silence lasted for 3 seconds. Then it was not applause that broke it. It was the sound of 50 chairs scraping back as 50 of the world's most powerful people surged to their feet. Not to leave, but to get to her. The next hour was a blur. Alice was no longer a person. She was the center of a new gravity. Ms. Dawson, a masterpiece. Mr. Staub, the Swiss banker, was the first to reach her. He grasped her hand, his face flushed. I must apologize. I have been trying to get a meeting with your office for a week. Your vision, it's magnificent." "Thank you, Mr. Staub," Alice said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "My team will be in touch tomorrow to discuss the logistics for your shipping clients." "Alice?" The Greek magnate Stavros bellowed, cutting through the crowd. He was a bear of a man, but he looked at her with the eyes of a disciple. "Forget these bankers. I want 20 units. Not pre-orders. Orders. 20. Now. I'll pay a 50% premium for expedited delivery. We will retrofit my entire fleet." "Of course, Mr. Stavros. My head of logistics will take your details." She was masterful. She was precise, charming, but not warm, brilliant, but not arrogant. She was in every sense the CEO. She moved through the crowd, a word here, a nod there, delegating, promising, and most of all closing. She had secured in less than an hour letters of intent and hardline orders that totaled over $900 million. She finally extricated herself, promising a final word to the UN envoy, and made her way to the bow, seeking a moment of silence. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving a deep, satisfying sense of accomplishment. As she passed a darkened lounge, she heard a sound that made her freeze. "It's just... I can't believe it." It was a woman's voice, high and reedy with tears. "He told me he was a vice president. He told me he was important." Alice looked. It was Chloe. She was huddled on a deck chair, her bright yellow bikini now covered by a deckhand's oversized jacket. She was talking to another woman, one of the +1s from the Aurelia. "He's nothing." Chloe wept, her mascara running. "Staub had his security remove him from the boat. They just walked him to the gangplank and left him on the quay, like trash." "What did you do, darling?" the other woman asked, sounding bored. "What could I do? I stayed on the boat. But that awful banker, he told me. He told me I should leave too. He said I had bad taste in men." "Me?" Chloe sniffled. Then her voice turned cold and calculating. "It doesn't matter. I met a man. A producer. He owns a studio. He said he liked my look. He's on the Odyssey. He's taking me to the party on the Odyssey." A small, cold part of Alice's mind registered the information. She had seen the producer. He was in his 70s with a reptilian gaze and a notorious reputation. Chloe was, Alice realized, just like Mark. A parasite always looking for the next host. Alice felt nothing. No pity, no superiority. Just nothing. She turned and walked away, leaving the sound of Chloe's weeping behind. She made her way up a private spiral staircase to the Odyssey's skydeck, a place reserved for only two people, Arthur Wainwright and his CEO. Arthur was standing at the railing, a simple glass of mineral water in his hand. The harbor was a carpet of diamonds, below them the noise of the parties, and the city a distant civilized hum. "Well," Arthur said, not turning, "I'd say that went rather well. Stavros looked like he was going to kiss you. I've never seen him look at anyone like that except maybe his first tanker." Alice smiled a real tired smile. "He's all in, 20 units, and the Norwegian fleet wants to license the patent for their Arctic operations. $900 million in one afternoon," Arthur mused. "Not a bad day's work, Madam CEO." He finally turned to her, his blue eyes sharp in the twilight. "You handled that distraction well today." Alice's smile faded. The cold stone of shame she'd felt earlier returned sharp and unwelcome. "The distraction, sir? You mean the sensor glitch on Deck 4? "No," Arthur said, his voice quiet. "Your ex-husband, Mark Jennings. I saw the entire interaction from the tender. He was loud and spectacularly wrong." Alice flinched, her face flushing. This was the one stain on the day. "Mr. Wainwright." "Arthur, I am so sorry. I can't tell you how unprofessional I feel. That he would bring our personal history to your event. I promise you it will never ever happen again." Arthur held up a hand. "Alice, stop. You will do yourself a great disservice if you apologize for his failing. You have nothing to be sorry for. He is the one who should be." I don't even understand how he was here," she said, shaking her head. "His firm is Jennings and Croft. They aren't at this level. He was a guest of a guest. He was punching so far above his weight." "Ah, yes. Jennings and Croft Financial Services," Arthur said, taking a long sip of his water. "An ambitious mid-level acquisitions firm out of Zurich. Decent portfolio, but over-leveraged. They were aggressive." "You know them?" Alice asked, confused by his detailed knowledge. "Oh, yes," Arthur said with a distinct lack of drama. "I know them intimately. I bought them 7 months ago." The air left Alice's lungs in a rush. The sound of the city, the water, everything seemed to go silent. "You... what?" "It was a distressed asset," Arthur explained, as if discussing the weather. "The parent company was going under. I absorbed their portfolio to get my hands on a few of their biotech holdings. Jennings and Croft was just part of the package. I've been restructuring it from the top down." Alice's mind was spinning, trying to process the impossible angles of what he was saying. You own Mark's company. You've owned it for 7 months." "Correct. Which brings me to the point." He leaned against the railing. "When your initial proposal came to the foundation, it was flagged. Not just for its genius, but for your name. My head of M&A compliance, an excellent, terrifyingly efficient woman named Sarah Jenkins, came to me. She said," Arthur continued, "Sir, we have a potential conflict of interest. The woman with the revolutionary green tech proposal, Alice Dawson. She's the ex-wife of one of our VPs in the Zurich office, Mark Jennings." "I see," Alice said, her voice small. "So you knew?" "I knew of him," Arthur corrected. "But I asked Sarah to do a deep dive. Standard procedure when a new high-level executive is being considered. We check for any potential liabilities. Personal, financial, you name it. We check the people you'll be working with. And we check the people you've left behind." He looked at her. "Her report was comprehensive. It turns out Mr. Jennings, he's not just an arrogant fool, Alice. He's a thief." "A thief?" she whispered, horrified. What do you mean, like from the company?" "From everyone," Arthur said, his voice hardening. "First from you. Sarah's audit found that he'd been filing benefits claims for a spouse he'd divorced 6 months prior. He was still claiming you as a dependent on his high-level corporate medical and dental plan. It's not a lot of money not to him, but it's insurance fraud. It's a felony, and it's stupid. Alice felt sick. All those months she'd been paying for her own terrible low-level insurance. He had been using her. And then, Arthur went on, he stole from me. His expense reports were a work of fiction. He was expensing client dinners at restaurants in Monaco and Paris dinners that, when cross-referenced, were found to be with Miss Chloe. He was using company funds to build his new life on the ashes of his old one. He was billing the company for first-class air travel he never took. He's a parasite, Alice. A small, common garden-variety parasite. Alice stared at him speechless. She was piecing it all together. The arrogance, the new suit, the desperation. "You acquired my company," she said, the words catching in her throat, "because it was brilliant, because it was the future." "Without a doubt," Arthur agreed. "It is the single most important piece of marine engineering I have seen in my lifetime. You are a genius, and I wanted that genius on my team. That is the only reason you are here." He paused, then allowed a small, cold smile to touch his lips. "And," he added as a, let's call it a synergistic bonus, "it gave me the opportunity to do a long overdue house cleaning. I do not tolerate parasites in my ecosystem, Alice. Not in the ocean and not in my boardrooms. A man who would steal from his own past will absolutely steal from my future. He is a liability. You are the asset." The math was very, very simple. 100 yards away on the public quay, Mark Jennings sat on a cold marble bench. He had been kicked off the Aurelia. His client, Mr. Staub, was gone. His boss, the one he was supposed to be impressing, wasn't answering his phone. He was a ghost at the feast, watching the glittering lights of the Odyssey dance on the water. It was the center of the world, and he was on the outside. His whole body ached with a deep, profound humiliation. "It doesn't matter," he muttered to himself, rocking slightly. "It's a setback. I'll call Richard on Monday. We'll laugh about this. That witch. She must have poisoned Wainwright against me. She... His phone buzzed in his pocket. A spark of hope. Was it his boss? He pulled it out. The screen was bright in the darkness. It was an email. From HR Automated Portal Subject. Notification of employment status. His blood ran cold. Wainwright Holdings. Why? Why would it say Wainwright? He opened it. His thumb was shaking. "Dear Mr. Jennings, this email is to inform you that your position as Senior Vice President European Markets with Jennings & Croft Financial Services, a subsidiary of Wainwright Holdings, has been eliminated as part of a strategic corporate restructuring effective immediately. Your access to all company systems, email, and property has been revoked. A package concerning your final compensation severance details and COBRA benefits will be sent to your address on file. Please be advised that the cause for this termination is under review by our compliance department pending an audit of your expense and benefits history. We wish you well in your future endeavors." The phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the stone. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He just deflated. The Tom Ford suit, the puffed-up chest, the arrogant smirk, it all dissolved, leaving a hollow, terrified man on a bench. He frantically picked up the phone. He tried to open his company email app. A red banner, access denied. He tried to log into the corporate VPN. User not found. It was real. He looked up, desperate, scanning the crowds. He saw her, Chloe, across the street. She was laughing, her high-pitched tinkle cutting through the night. She was stepping into a black Bentley, her hand being kissed by a man in his 70s. She got in, the door shut with an expensive thud, and the car pulled away. She never even looked in his direction. He was alone. He was nothing. The man who thought he was on a rocket ship had just been jettisoned, left to burn up in the atmosphere. Back on the Odyssey, Alice watched the light on her own phone. Arthur was looking at his vintage Patek Philippe. "You said—" "The math was simple," Alice said, her voice quiet. "It was," Arthur said. "He was a bad investment, and I always cut my losses. His entire division was made redundant 2 days ago. He just hasn't been checking his emails." "He wasn't here celebrating a promotion, was he?" she asked, the final pathetic piece clicking into place. "No," Arthur said with a note of finality. "He was here on his last few $100s of stolen expense money, a desperate, pathetic attempt to network his way out of a hole he'd already dug. He wasn't celebrating Alice. He was panicking. He was, in a word, redundant." Alice stared at his watch. "What time is it in Zurich?" 9:00 p.m., Arthur said. The automated termination notice was scheduled to be delivered to his personal inbox, right about now. Alice closed her eyes. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel triumph. She didn't even feel anger. She just felt light. The last invisible shackle that had tethered her to Mark Jennings, to her old life, to the woman in the cafe, didn't just break. It had never really been there. It had been an illusion, and now it had evaporated. She turned from the city and looked out at the vast, dark expanse of the open sea. "He called me ballast," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He said I was—" "Wait," holding him back. "An understandable mistake," Arthur replied, joining her at the railing. He too looked out at the dark horizon. "He's a man who has only ever lived on the surface. He's impressed by the whitecaps, by the spray, by the noise. He has no idea about the power of the currents underneath, the ones that actually move the world." He raised his glass of water, the ice clinking softly. "To the currents, Madam CEO." Alice raised her champagne flute, the bubbles catching the light of the moon. She thought of the code she wrote, the engines she designed, the deep, silent, powerful systems that were at this very moment healing the world. "To the currents," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Let's go change the tide." What a comeback. Alice didn't just get revenge. She got redemption. She proved that the person someone throws away might just be the treasure the whole world is waiting for. Her ex thought she was ballast, but she was the one with the brilliance to change the world. He was left with his arrogance, and she was left with an empire. What do you think of Alice's story? Have you ever had someone underestimate you only for you to come back stronger than ever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you loved this story of triumph and just desserts, please do us a huge favor and hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories just like this one. We have a new one coming soon, and you don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.